In today's video, we'll explore 30 of the most common Agile Project Manager interview questions and answers you'll be asked by hiring managers during your interview. Each answer can be customized to highlight your unique qualifications and experiences. Before your interview, it's important to research the company and review the job description so you can incorporate key skills relevant to the job role in your answers. Question number 1. Can you tell me about yourself? When answering this question, give a clear overview of your project management background, Agile experience, and leadership style. Hiring managers are looking for someone who can manage delivery, support teams, communicate with stakeholders, and adapt when priorities change. Keep your answer focused on business outcomes, not just Agile ceremonies or tools. A strong answer should show that you understand Agile is about delivering value, improving collaboration, and helping teams work smarter. I'm an Agile project manager who focuses on helping teams deliver business value in a practical, organized, and collaborative way. My background includes coordinating cross-functional teams, managing timelines, removing blockers, and keeping stakeholders aligned throughout the project lifecycle. I'm comfortable working with Agile frameworks like Scrum and Kanban, but I don't treat Agile as just a checklist of ceremonies. I see it as a way to improve communication, create transparency, and help teams respond to change without losing focus. One of my strengths is translating high-level goals into clear priorities so the team understands what matters most and why. I also pay close attention to risks, dependencies, and stakeholder expectations, because even in Agile environments, structure and accountability are still important. Overall, I would describe myself as someone who balances flexibility with discipline, supports the team without micromanaging, and stays focused on delivering outcomes that actually move the business forward. Question number 2. What is Agile and how does it differ from Waterfall? When answering this question, show that you understand Agile as a mindset, not just a process. Hiring managers want to see that you can explain it clearly in practical terms, especially how it impacts delivery, collaboration, and adaptability. Focus on outcomes like faster feedback, flexibility, and continuous improvement rather than just definitions. Keep the comparison simple and grounded in real-world application. Agile is a way of working that focuses on delivering value in small iterative increments while staying flexible to change. Instead of trying to plan everything up front, Agile allows teams to build, test, and adjust continuously based on feedback. In contrast, Waterfall is more linear and structured, where each phase, like planning, development, and testing, happens in sequence, and changes can be harder to accommodate once the project is underway. From my experience, Agile works well in environments where requirements evolve or where early user feedback is critical, because it allows teams to adjust direction without disrupting the entire project. Waterfall can be effective when requirements are stable and clearly defined from the beginning. What I focus on is choosing the right approach based on the project, but when working in Agile, I prioritize collaboration, transparency, and delivering usable results early rather than waiting until the end to validate success. Question number 3. What is your experience working as an Agile project manager? For this question, highlight your hands-on experience leading Agile teams and delivering results. Hiring managers are looking for ownership, leadership, and your ability to manage both people and processes. Focus on how you've supported teams, handled challenges, and delivered outcomes rather than just listing responsibilities. Make it clear how your experience translates into value for the organization. Now, when answering this question without direct experience, focus on transferable skills, relevant exposure, and your understanding of Agile principles. Hiring managers are looking for potential, not perfection. They want to see that you understand how Agile works and can apply it in real situations. Highlight any experience with teamwork, coordination, problem solving, or projects, even if they weren't formally Agile. Show initiative by mentioning learning, certifications, or self-study. First, here is a sample answer for someone with Agile project management experience. My experience as an Agile project manager involves leading cross-functional teams through end-to-end delivery while keeping everyone aligned on priorities and goals. I've worked closely with product owners, developers, and stakeholders to ensure that the backlog reflects real business needs and that the team has clarity on what to focus on each sprint. A big part of my role has been removing blockers, facilitating communication, and making sure progress is visible and measurable. I've also handled situations where priorities shifted mid-project, and instead of seeing that as a disruption, I worked with the team to reassess, reprioritize, and move forward efficiently. One thing I focus on is creating a team environment where people feel comfortable raising concerns early, which helps avoid bigger issues later. Overall, my experience has taught me how to balance delivery, team support, and stakeholder expectations while maintaining a steady, predictable flow of value. Now, here's a sample answer for someone without Agile project management experience. While I haven't held a formal Agile Project Manager title yet, I've developed a strong foundation in Agile principles through both hands-on experiences and focused learning. In my previous roles and projects, I've been part of team environments where collaboration, adaptability, and meeting deadlines were critical, which aligns closely with how Agile teams operate. For example, I've worked on projects where priorities shifted quickly, and I had to help coordinate tasks, communicate updates, and keep everyone aligned to ensure we stayed on track. I've also taken the time to learn Agile frameworks like Scrum and Kanban, and I understand how things like sprint planning, stand-ups, and retrospectives contribute to delivering value. What I bring is a strong ability to stay organized, communicate clearly, and support a team in reaching its goals. I'm eager to apply these skills in a formal Agile environment and continue learning while contributing in a meaningful way from day one. Question number 4. What Agile frameworks have you worked with? When answering this question, be specific about the frameworks you've used and how you've applied them. Hiring managers want to see practical experience, not just theoretical knowledge. Explain how you've adapted frameworks to fit real project needs rather than following them rigidly. Showing flexibility and understanding of when to use each framework is key. I've worked primarily with Scrum and Kanban, and in some cases, a hybrid approach depending on the needs of the project. With Scrum, I've been involved in sprint planning, daily stand-ups, sprint reviews, and retrospectives, ensuring that each ceremony adds value rather than just being a routine. I focus on keeping sprints realistic, helping the team stay committed to achievable goals while maintaining quality. With Kanban, I've managed workflows by visualizing tasks, limiting work in progress, and improving cycle time, which works especially well for teams handling continuous delivery or support-based work. I've also applied a hybrid model where structured sprint planning is combined with flexible workflow management to handle both planned and unplanned tasks. What I've learned is that frameworks are tools, not rules, so I focus on adapting them to improve efficiency, communication, and delivery, rather than strictly following them without context. Question number 5. What is Scrum and how does it work? When answering this question, explain Scrum in a simple, practical way rather than reciting textbook definitions. Hiring managers want to see that you understand how Scrum actually functions in a real team environment. Focus on how work flows through sprints, the roles involved, and how value is delivered incrementally. Keep it grounded in outcomes like transparency, collaboration, and continuous improvement. Scrum is an agile framework that helps teams deliver work in short, structured cycles called sprints, usually lasting 2 to 4 weeks. At the start of each sprint, the team selects a set of prioritized tasks from the backlog and commits to completing them within that time frame. Throughout the sprint, the team holds daily stand-ups to stay aligned, identify blockers, and keep progress visible. At the end, there's a review to demonstrate what was completed and a retrospective to reflect on what can be improved. What I focus on in Scrum is making sure these ceremonies actually serve a purpose and don't become routine meetings. I work closely with the product owner to ensure priorities are clear and with the team to remove obstacles quickly. When Scrum is working well, it creates a steady rhythm where teams can deliver consistent value, adapt to feedback, and continuously improve how they work together. Question number 6. What is the role of a Scrum Master? For this question, clarify that the Scrum Master is not a traditional manager, but a facilitator and servant leader. Hiring managers are looking for your understanding of how the role supports the team and protects the agile process. Focus on enabling the team, removing blockers, and improving collaboration. Avoid describing the role as controlling or directing the team. The Scrum Master's role is to support the team by creating an environment where they can work effectively and continuously improve. It's not about managing people directly, but about facilitating the process, removing blockers, and ensuring that Scrum practices are followed in a way that adds value. A big part of the role is helping the team stay focused during the sprint, while also protecting them from unnecessary distractions or scope changes. The Scrum Master also works closely with the product owner to make sure the backlog is clear and ready for upcoming work. In my experience, one of the most important aspects is observing team dynamics and identifying areas for improvement, whether it's communication, workflow, or collaboration. The goal is to help the team become more self-sufficient over time. When done well, the Scrum Master role leads to a more efficient, motivated, and aligned team that consistently delivers results. Question number 7. How do you handle changing requirements in Agile projects? When answering this question, show that you are comfortable with change and know how to manage it without disrupting progress. Hiring managers want to see that you can balance flexibility with structure. Focus on communication, prioritization, and keeping the team aligned. Avoid suggesting that all changes are accepted without evaluation. I handle changing requirements by first assessing the impact and then working with stakeholders to determine the best way to incorporate those changes without disrupting the team unnecessarily. In Agile, change is expected, but it still needs to be managed carefully. If a change comes up during a sprint, I usually evaluate whether it's urgent enough to interrupt current work or if it can be added to the backlog for the next sprint. I work closely with the product owner to reprioritize based on business value, ensuring the most important items are always at the top. Communication is key, so I make sure the team understands why the change is happening and how it affects their work. I also try to minimize last-minute disruptions by encouraging stakeholders to plan ahead whenever possible. Overall, my approach is to stay flexible while still maintaining a clear structure so the team can continue delivering value consistently. Question number 8. How do you prioritize the product backlog? For this question, demonstrate that you understand how to align backlog priorities with business value. Hiring managers want to see that you can work closely with stakeholders and make informed decisions. Focus on factors like impact, urgency, dependencies, and effort. Show that prioritization is an ongoing process, not a one-time activity. I prioritize the product backlog by focusing on delivering the highest business value while balancing effort, risk, and dependencies. I work closely with the product owner and stakeholders to understand what features or improvements will have the greatest impact, whether that's improving user experience, increasing efficiency, or meeting a specific business goal. I also consider technical dependencies and risks because sometimes addressing those early can prevent bigger issues later. I like to keep the backlog well refined with clear and actionable items so the team can move quickly during sprint planning. Prioritization isn't something I treat as static, it's something I revisit regularly as new information comes in. I also encourage open discussions with the team since they often provide valuable input on complexity and feasibility. My goal is to create a backlog that is clear, realistic, and always aligned with what delivers the most value at any given time. Question number 9. What is a sprint and how do you plan one? When answering this question, clearly explain both the concept of a sprint and your role in planning it effectively. Hiring managers want to see that you can balance business priorities with team capacity and ensure clarity before execution begins. Focus on collaboration with the product owner, realistic commitments, and preparing the team for success. Show that sprint planning is intentional, not rushed. A sprint is a fixed time period where the team commits to completing a defined set of work from the product backlog, typically over 2 to 4 weeks. When I plan a sprint, I start by ensuring the backlog is well prepared with clearly defined and prioritized items that are ready for the team to pick up. During sprint planning, I work closely with the product owner to communicate priorities and expected outcomes, while also encouraging the team to assess effort and feasibility. I pay close attention to team capacity, making sure we don't overcommit because that can lead to burnout or unfinished work. I also make sure everyone understands the sprint goal, so the team has a shared direction rather than just a list of tasks. Throughout the process, I encourage open discussion so any concerns or dependencies are addressed early. A well-planned sprint sets the tone for execution, and I focus on creating clarity, alignment, and a realistic path to delivering value. Question number 10. How do you handle stakeholder expectations in agile projects? For this question, show that you can manage communication, alignment, and trust. Hiring managers want to know that you can keep stakeholders informed without overpromising or creating confusion. Focus on transparency, setting realistic expectations, and regular updates. Demonstrate that you can handle both positive and challenging conversations professionally. I handle stakeholder expectations by being transparent, consistent, and proactive in communication. At the start of a project, I make sure expectations are clearly defined in terms of scope, timelines, and what success looks like. As the project progresses, I provide regular updates, not just on what's going well, but also on any risks or challenges that could impact delivery. I've found that stakeholders appreciate honesty more than overly optimistic timelines that don't hold up. When priorities shift, I work with them to reevaluate and align on what matters most, rather than trying to force everything into the same time frame. I also make sure to translate technical progress into clear business-focused updates so everyone understands the impact. In situations where expectations need to be adjusted, I focus on presenting options and solutions rather than just problems. Overall, my goal is to build trust by keeping communication open, setting realistic expectations, and ensuring stakeholders always feel informed and involved. Question number 11. How do you manage multiple agile teams at once? When answering this question, demonstrate your ability to stay organized and maintain visibility across multiple work streams. Hiring managers want to see strong coordination, prioritization, and communication skills. Focus on how you keep teams aligned, manage dependencies, and ensure nothing falls through the cracks. Show that you can scale your approach without losing control. When managing multiple agile teams, I focus heavily on structure, visibility, and communication. I make sure each team has clear priorities and a well-maintained backlog so they can operate efficiently without constant direction. At the same time, I keep a high-level view of all projects to identify dependencies, risks, and potential conflicts early. I regularly check in with each team, not to micromanage, but to stay aware of progress and remove any blockers that could slow them down. One of the key things I do is ensure alignment across teams, especially when their work overlaps, so efforts are coordinated rather than duplicated or delayed. I also maintain consistent communication with stakeholders, providing updates that reflect the overall picture rather than isolated progress. Managing multiple teams requires balancing detail with big-picture thinking, and I focus on creating systems that keep everything organized while still allowing each team to work independently and effectively. Question number 12. What metrics do you use to measure team performance? For this question, show that you understand both quantitative and qualitative measures of performance. Hiring managers want to see that you don't rely on metrics blindly, but use them to support team improvement and delivery. Focus on practical metrics like velocity, cycle time, and quality, along with team health. Emphasize that metrics are tools for insight, not pressure. I use a combination of metrics to understand how the team is performing, but I focus on using them as tools for improvement rather than strict targets. Velocity is one metric I track to understand how much work the team can realistically complete over time, which helps with planning and forecasting. I also look at cycle time and lead time to measure how efficiently work is moving through the process, because that often highlights bottlenecks or delays. In addition to that, I pay attention to quality metrics, such as defects or rework, since delivering quickly doesn't matter if the output isn't reliable. Beyond numbers, I also consider team health, including communication, collaboration, and overall morale, because those factors directly impact performance. I use these insights during retrospectives to guide discussions and identify areas for improvement. My goal is to create a balanced view of performance that helps the team grow while continuing to deliver consistent value. Question number 13. What is velocity and how is it calculated? When answering this question, show that you understand velocity as a planning tool rather than a performance score. Hiring managers want to see that you use it to support realistic forecasting and team consistency, not to pressure teams. Explain it simply, then connect it to how you actually apply it in real scenarios. Avoid sounding overly technical. Keep it practical and outcome-focused. Velocity is a measure of how much work a team completes within a sprint. typically based on story points or effort estimates assigned to backlog items. It's calculated by adding up the total story points of completed work at the end of a sprint, and then averaging that over several sprints to identify a consistent pattern. I don't treat velocity as a performance metric, but rather as a planning tool that helps set realistic expectations. For example, if a team consistently delivers around a certain number of points, that becomes a reliable baseline for future sprint planning. I also use velocity trends to identify patterns, such as sudden drops that might indicate blockers, overcommitment, or team capacity issues. What's important to me is keeping velocity stable and predictable rather than constantly trying to increase it. That stability helps build trust with stakeholders and allows the team to plan work more confidently. Ultimately, I use velocity to support better decision-making, not to measure individual or team pressure. Question number 14. How do you ensure continuous improvement in your team? For this question, focus on your approach to learning, feedback, and team growth. Hiring managers want to see that you actively create an environment where improvement is ongoing, not occasional. Talk about retrospectives, feedback loops, and small, consistent changes. Show that you don't just identify issues, you follow through on improvements. I ensure continuous improvement by creating a consistent rhythm of reflection, feedback, and action within the team. Retrospectives are a key part of that, but I don't treat them as just a routine meeting. I make sure they're a safe space where team members can openly discuss what's working and what isn't without feeling judged. Once we identify areas for improvement, I focus on turning those into clear, actionable steps that we can actually implement in the next sprint. I also follow up on those actions to make sure they're not forgotten, because improvement only matters if it leads to real change. Beyond retrospectives, I encourage ongoing feedback during daily interactions so issues can be addressed early, rather than waiting until the end of a sprint. I also look at performance data, like cycle time or bottlenecks, to guide discussions. Over time, these small improvements build momentum and create a team culture that values learning, adaptability, and consistent progress. Question number 15. Describe a time you led an agile project successfully. When answering this question, use a structured example that highlights your leadership, decision-making, and ability to deliver results. Hiring managers want to see ownership, not just participation. Focus on the challenge, your actions, and the outcome, including measurable impact if possible. Keep the story clear but detailed enough to show depth. In one project, I led a cross-functional team responsible for delivering a new internal system that had tight deadlines and evolving requirements. Early on, there was a lack of clarity around priorities, which caused confusion and slowed progress. I worked closely with stakeholders to clearly define goals and reorganize the backlog so the team could focus on the most valuable work first. I also introduced more structured sprint planning and improved communication between the team and stakeholders to reduce misunderstandings. During the project, requirements continued to change, but instead of disrupting the team, we adapted by reprioritizing at the start of each sprint and keeping the team focused on achievable goals. I also made sure blockers were addressed quickly so the team could maintain momentum. By the end of the project, we delivered the system on time, with strong feedback from users. What made it successful wasn't just the delivery, but how the team became more aligned, efficient, and confident throughout the process. Question number 16. Describe a time an agile project did not go as planned. For this question, show honesty, accountability, and learning. Hiring managers want to see how you handle setbacks and what you do differently afterward. Focus on what went wrong, how you responded, and what you improved. Avoid blaming others. Keep the focus on growth and problem solving. In one project, we faced challenges because the initial backlog wasn't clearly defined and priorities kept shifting mid-sprint. This caused confusion within the team and led to incomplete work at the end of a few sprints. Looking back, I realized that we had moved too quickly into execution without fully aligning on priorities and expectations. Once I identified the issue, I worked with the product owner to refine the backlog more thoroughly and ensure that items were clear and ready before entering a sprint. I also introduced stricter guidelines around limiting mid-sprint changes unless they were critical. At the same time, I improved communication with stakeholders so they understood the impact of frequent changes on delivery. Over the next few sprints, the team became more stable, and we saw a noticeable improvement in both completion rates and overall morale. That experience taught me the importance of strong backlog preparation and setting clear boundaries, even in flexible, agile environments. Question number 17. How do you handle team conflicts in an agile environment? When answering this question, show that you can address conflict early, stay neutral, and guide the team toward resolution. Hiring managers want to see emotional intelligence, communication skills, and the ability to maintain a healthy team dynamic. Focus on listening, understanding both sides, and facilitating a solution rather than imposing one. Keep the emphasis on collaboration and long-term team effectiveness. I handle team conflicts by addressing them early and creating space for open, respectful communication. In agile environments, conflicts often come from misunderstandings, pressure, or different working styles, so I focus on getting to the root cause rather than just the surface issue. I usually start by speaking with each person individually to understand their perspective and then, if appropriate, bring them together for a constructive discussion. During that conversation, I help guide it so both sides feel heard while keeping the focus on the team's shared goals. I avoid taking sides and instead focus on finding common ground and practical solutions that move the team forward. I also reinforce the importance of respect and collaboration, especially in high-pressure situations. After resolving the conflict, I check in to ensure things remain positive and that no lingering issues affect team performance. Over time, this approach helps build trust and creates a culture where people feel comfortable addressing challenges openly. Question number 18. How do you facilitate daily stand-ups? For this question, demonstrate that you understand the purpose of stand-ups and how to keep them effective. Hiring managers want to see that you can maintain focus, encourage participation, and avoid turning them into long status meetings. Emphasize efficiency, clarity, and identifying blockers. Show that you adapt your approach based on the team's needs. I facilitate daily stand-ups by keeping them focused, efficient, and valuable for the team. The goal is to quickly align on progress, identify any blockers, and ensure everyone knows what others are working on, so I make sure the meeting stays within a short time frame. I encourage each team member to share what they worked on, what they're planning next, and any challenges they're facing, but I also guide the conversation so it doesn't turn into a deep problem-solving session. If an issue requires more discussion, I take it offline with the relevant people after the stand-up. I also pay close attention to patterns like recurring blockers or dependencies and work to address those outside the meeting. Over time, I adapt the format based on what works best for the team, whether that means focusing more on blockers or improving how updates are shared. My goal is to make stand-ups something the team finds useful, not just a routine they go through every day. Question number 19. What is the role of the product owner? When answering this question, show that you understand the product owner's responsibility for maximizing value and managing the backlog. Hiring managers want to see that you recognize the importance of collaboration between the product owner and the team. Focus on prioritization, clarity, and stakeholder alignment. Avoid oversimplifying the role. The product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product by managing and prioritizing the backlog based on business needs. They act as the main link between stakeholders and the development team, ensuring that what the team is working on aligns with overall goals. A key part of their role is clearly defining backlog items so the team understands what needs to be built and why it matters. They also continuously refine priorities as new information comes in, balancing business value, user needs, and technical considerations. From my experience, a strong product owner maintains close communication with both stakeholders and the team, which helps prevent misunderstandings and keeps everyone aligned. I work closely with product owners to ensure the backlog is always in a ready state for upcoming sprints, which makes planning more efficient. When the product owner role is done well, it creates clarity, direction, and a steady flow of meaningful work for the team. Question number 20. How do you deal with scope creep in Agile? For this question, show that you understand how to manage change without losing control of the project. Hiring managers want to see that you balance flexibility with structure, focus on prioritization, communication, and protecting the team's focus. Avoid suggesting that all changes should be accepted without evaluation. I deal with scope creep by first recognizing that change is a normal part of Agile, but it still needs to be managed carefully. When new requests come in, I don't immediately add them to the current sprint unless they are truly critical. Instead, I work with the product owner to evaluate the request based on business value and priority, and then place it appropriately in the backlog. This helps ensure that the team stays focused on the sprint goals without constant disruption. I also communicate clearly with stakeholders about the impact of adding new work, including how it might affect timelines or existing priorities. By making those trade-offs visible, it becomes easier to make informed decisions rather than reacting impulsively. In some cases, I may suggest deferring lower priority work to accommodate more important changes. Overall, my approach is to stay flexible while maintaining enough structure so the team can deliver consistently without feeling overwhelmed or constantly shifting direction. Question number 21. How do you ensure team accountability in Agile? When answering this question, show that you understand accountability in Agile comes from ownership, transparency, and team commitment, not top-down control. Hiring managers want to see that you create an environment where the team takes responsibility for outcomes. Focus on clear goals, visibility, and follow-through. Emphasize that accountability is built into the process, not forced. I ensure team accountability by creating a clear structure where expectations, responsibilities, and progress are visible to everyone. It starts with well-defined sprint goals and backlog items, so the team understands exactly what they're committing to and why it matters. During sprint planning, I encourage the team to take ownership of the work rather than having tasks assigned to them, which builds a stronger sense of responsibility. Throughout the sprint, tools like boards and daily stand-ups help keep progress transparent so everyone can see how things are moving and where support might be needed. If something falls behind, I focus on understanding why rather than placing blame, and we address it as a team. I also reinforce follow-through by revisiting commitments during sprint reviews and retrospectives. Over time, this approach builds a culture where accountability is shared and team members naturally take responsibility for both their work and the overall success of the sprint. Question number 22. What is a retrospective and how do you run one? For this question, demonstrate that you know how to turn retrospectives into meaningful improvement sessions. Hiring managers want to see that you go beyond just asking what went well and actually drive actionable outcomes. Focus on structure, team engagement, and follow-through. Show that you create a safe environment where honest feedback is encouraged. A retrospective is a dedicated session where the team reflects on the previous sprint to identify what worked well, what didn't, and how things can be improved moving forward. When I run a retrospective, I focus on creating an open and safe environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts honestly. I usually start by gathering input from the team, whether through discussion or simple formats that encourage participation. From there, we identify key themes and prioritize the most impactful areas for improvement. The most important part for me is turning those discussions into clear, actionable steps that we can implement in the next sprint. I also make sure to follow up on those actions, because without that, retrospectives lose their value. Over time, I adapt the format to keep it engaging and relevant so it doesn't feel repetitive. When done effectively, retrospectives help the team continuously improve and strengthen how they work together. Question number 23. How do you handle underperforming team members? When answering this question, show empathy, leadership, and a structured approach. Hiring managers want to see that you address performance issues constructively rather than avoiding them or reacting harshly. Focus on understanding the root cause, providing support, and setting clear expectations. Keep the tone balanced between accountability and support. I handle underperformance by first trying to understand the root cause rather than jumping to conclusions. There could be many reasons, such as unclear expectations, workload challenges, or even external factors. I usually start with a one-on-one conversation to understand their perspective and identify any obstacles they might be facing. From there, I work with them to set clear expectations and define achievable goals so they have a clear path forward. I also provide support, whether that's additional guidance, pairing them with a teammate, or helping remove blockers that are affecting their performance. At the same time, I make it clear that accountability is important, and I follow up regularly to track progress. If improvement doesn't happen over time, I would involve the appropriate leadership channels while still maintaining professionalism. My goal is always to help the individual succeed while ensuring the overall team performance remains strong and consistent. Question number 24. What tools have you used for Agile project management? For this question, highlight your familiarity with tools, but focus more on how you use them effectively. Hiring managers want to see practical experience, not just a list of tools. Explain how these tools support visibility, collaboration, and workflow management. Show that you can adapt to different tools as needed. I've worked with several Agile project management tools, including Jira, Trello, and Azure DevOps, depending on the organization and team needs. While each tool has its own features, I focus on using them to create clear visibility into the workflow and keep everyone aligned. For example, I use boards to track progress in real time, making it easy for the team and stakeholders to see what's in progress, what's completed, and where there might be delays. I also use these tools to manage backlogs, ensuring items are well-defined, prioritized, and ready for upcoming sprints. Beyond task tracking, I use reporting features to monitor trends like velocity and cycle time, which helps with planning and identifying areas for improvement. At the same time, I don't rely solely on tools. I make sure they support communication rather than replace it. My approach is to use tools as a way to enhance transparency and efficiency while keeping the team focused on delivering value. Question number 25. How do you communicate progress to stakeholders? When answering this question, show that you can translate team progress into clear business-focused updates. Hiring managers want to see that you keep stakeholders informed without overwhelming them with unnecessary detail. Focus on transparency, consistency, and tailoring communication to your audience. Highlight that you communicate both progress and risks, not just positive updates. I communicate progress to stakeholders by keeping updates clear, consistent, and focused on what matters most to them. Instead of going into too much technical detail, I translate progress into business outcomes, such as what has been delivered, what's in progress, and how it impacts overall goals. I typically provide regular updates through sprint reviews, dashboards, and brief status summaries, depending on stakeholder preferences. I also make sure to highlight any risks, blockers, or changes early, so there are no surprises later on. When priorities shift, I clearly explain the reasons behind those changes and how they affect timelines or scope. I've found that stakeholders appreciate honesty and clarity, even when the message isn't perfect. I also keep communication two-way by encouraging questions and feedback, which helps maintain alignment. Overall, my goal is to build trust by making sure stakeholders always have a clear understanding of where things stand and what to expect next. Question number 26. What is the difference between Kanban and Scrum? For this question, demonstrate that you understand both frameworks and when to use each. Hiring managers want to see practical knowledge, not just definitions. Focus on structure, workflow, and flexibility. Show that you understand how each approach fits different types of work. Kanban and Scrum are both agile approaches, but they differ in how work is structured and managed. Scrum is based on fixed-length sprints with defined roles, ceremonies, and commitments, which creates a structured rhythm for planning and delivery. Kanban, on the other hand, is more flexible and focuses on continuous flow, where work moves through stages without fixed timeframes. In Kanban, the focus is on visualizing work, limiting work in progress, and improving flow efficiency over time. From my experience, Scrum works well for projects that benefit from regular planning cycles and clear sprint goals, while Kanban is more effective for teams handling ongoing or unpredictable work, like support or maintenance tasks. I've also used a hybrid approach when needed, combining structured planning with flexible workflow management. Ultimately, I choose the approach based on what helps the team deliver value most effectively rather than strictly following one framework. Question number 27. How do you estimate user stories? When answering this question, show that you understand estimation as a team-driven process. Hiring managers want to see collaboration, practicality, and awareness of uncertainty. Focus on relative estimation, discussion, and continuous refinement. Avoid presenting estimation as an exact science. I approach user story estimation as a collaborative process where the team works together to assess effort, complexity, and uncertainty. I usually facilitate sessions where the team discusses each story in detail, making sure everyone understands the requirements before assigning an estimate. We often use relative estimation techniques like story points to compare tasks against each other rather than trying to predict exact time. I encourage open discussion during estimation because different perspectives can highlight risks or dependencies that might not be obvious at first. I also remind the team that estimates are not commitments, but informed guesses that help with planning. Over time, as the team gains experience, estimation becomes more consistent and reliable. I also review past estimates and actual outcomes to identify patterns and improve accuracy. My goal is to create a realistic planning process that supports delivery without putting unnecessary pressure on the team. Question number 28. What is a user story and what makes a good one? For this question, show that you understand both the purpose and quality of user stories. Hiring managers want to see that you focus on user value and clarity. Highlight structure, simplicity, and the importance of acceptance criteria. Keep it practical and tied to real delivery. A user story is a short, simple description of a feature or requirement from the perspective of the end user. It typically follows a format that explains who the user is, what they need, and why it matters, which helps keep the focus on delivering value. A good user story is clear, concise, and actionable, so the team can understand what needs to be built without confusion. It should also include acceptance criteria, which define what success looks like and help ensure the final outcome meets expectations. I also look for stories that are appropriately sized, meaning they can be completed within a sprint without being too large or too vague. In my experience, the quality of user stories has a direct impact on how smoothly a sprint runs. Well-defined stories reduce misunderstandings, improve estimation, and help the team deliver more consistently. My focus is always on making sure user stories are meaningful, well-structured, and aligned with real user needs. Question number 29. How do you manage dependencies between teams? When answering this question, show that you can think beyond a single team and manage coordination across multiple groups. Hiring managers want to see proactive planning, strong communication, and risk awareness. Focus on identifying dependencies early, maintaining visibility, and keeping teams aligned. Emphasize that you prevent issues rather than reacting to them late. I manage dependencies between teams by identifying them as early as possible and making sure they are clearly visible to everyone involved. During planning sessions, I work with teams to map out where their work overlaps and what needs to happen first so we can avoid delays later. I also maintain regular communication between teams, either through sync meetings or shared tracking tools, so everyone stays aligned on progress and expectations. If a dependency becomes a risk, I address it early by adjusting priorities, coordinating timelines, or escalating when needed. I also encourage teams to communicate directly with each other rather than relying only on me, which helps build stronger collaboration. In more complex situations, I break dependencies into smaller, manageable parts so they're easier to track and resolve. Overall, my goal is to reduce uncertainty, keep work flowing smoothly across teams, and make sure dependencies don't become bottlenecks that impact delivery. And finally, here's the last Agile Project Manager interview question and answer. Question number 30. How do you handle tight deadlines? In Agile projects, when answering this question, demonstrate your ability to stay calm, prioritize effectively, and maintain quality under pressure. Hiring managers want to see that you don't sacrifice long-term success for short-term speed. Focus on clear prioritization, communication, and realistic planning. Show that you can lead the team through pressure without creating chaos. When handling tight deadlines, I focus on prioritization, clarity, and keeping the team aligned on what matters most. The first step is to work with stakeholders to identify the most critical deliverables because not everything can always be done at once under time pressure. From there, I help the team break down work into manageable pieces and focus on delivering the highest value items first. I also make sure expectations are realistic by communicating any trade-offs, whether it's scope, timeline, or resources. During the process, I keep communication frequent so everyone stays informed and aligned, especially if challenges arise. I also pay close attention to team workload to avoid burnout, because pushing too hard can lead to mistakes and delays. If needed, I look for ways to simplify or streamline work without compromising quality. Overall, my approach is to stay focused, make smart decisions, and guide the team through pressure in a controlled and structured way rather than reacting impulsively. If you want to learn more on how to land jobs and reach your career goals, don't forget to hit that subscribe and bell notification button to get new videos every single week. Also, don't forget to hit that like button because that motivates me to keep doing what I do. Stay safe, keep smiling, and good luck.